Welcome to the Crow's Nest Interviews, where people from all walks of life and all ages share their unique life experiences and invaluable advice. Each episode provides a platform for ordinary people to tell their own unique stories, offering listeners a fresh perspective from the Crow's Nest. Whether it's tales of triumph, lessons learned, or reflections on life's journey, join us as we explore the rich human experience one interview at a time. All right, this is episode 1 of the Crow's Nest Interviews. I'm Connor, and today I have a very special guest, my dad. At 57 years old, he's lived through incredible experiences and has countless stories to share, from his childhood memories to his career to his 34 years of marriage to being a father of 6 kids. We'll dive into the lessons he's learned along the way. I'm excited to share his insights and wisdom with you. Dad, thanks for joining me for episode 1.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yes. To get warmed up, we'll do some warm-up questions. The first one I have is, what is the best book you've read, and how did it impact you?
Yeah, I don't know how you can ask a question like that and make it sound singular. So I have a few answers for this.
Okay.
Certainly, having started my life in a religious background, there's a number of religious books that have influenced me post our exit from our religion. CES letter was certainly powerful, but then I got into Buddhism for Beginners, End of Faith, God Delusion, and God is Not Great. Those all shaped kind of my spirituality, or lack thereof, views of the world. But on the pleasure side, I love outdoor adventure stories, nonfiction. And the one that got me into that was Into the Wild by Jon Krakauer. So I highly recommend that. And then if you're in the classics, Les Mis, Great Expectations, and Tale of Two Cities.
All right, that's a good list. Got a wide spectrum from spirituality to fiction. Next up is, what is a favorite food or meal that brings back a special memory for you?
So I don't have a particular meal, but pumpkin pie was my favorite from the time I was a young kid. So all birthdays, anytime I could ask for pumpkin pie, I asked for it. And Betsy, the funny spin on that is, Betsy, when we got married, knew how much I loved pumpkin pie and was dreading some involved homemade recipe. My mom tells her she buys store-bought crusts and Libby's from the can, and Betsy was thrilled. So
that must be where I get it from. That is my go-to. Every birthday is a pumpkin pie usually.
Yep.
If you could go back and relive any moment in your life, what would it be?
So this was a hard one, but the one that I came up with was Venice with just Betsy. Because when we were there, we had 2 teenage girls trailing us, Sydney and her friend Alyssa, and it wasn't quite as romantic as I had thought it could be.
Didn't give you that spark.
Exactly.
With 2 teenagers following you around. All right, and then we'll go through, in order, we're going to go through his childhood, his career, marriage and relationships, life lessons, his values and beliefs, and then his future and legacy. So to start out, in your childhood, what is one of your fondest memories from being a child?
So, as you know, lots of boating. Those were what we did as a family, and those are the memories that immediately come to mind. On those, the first one I remember is my dad peeling my hands off the side of the boat to make me try water skiing. I was 10, I think, 10 or 11, and nervous, and but now thinking back, right, it became such a large part of my life and how much I loved it, that moment is sort of funny. One of the stories from boating that is sort of fun was my dad used to tell us about landing on the beach. So you whip the skier in, and they ski right up onto the beach and just run out of their ski as the ski stops on the sand. And so he whips my older brother Dave, he whips him in, and my brother Dave skis with his left foot forward. So he whipped in going direction that favored his left side, and hits the beach and comes out of the ski, but now he's tumbling up the beach, scratching his shoulders and laying on his back. And I tell him, I'll show you how to do this. So I go out and I ski right foot forward. So I'm getting whipped in from the other side of the boat, and I hit the beach, go flipping up the beach, scratching my shoulders up, and the tracks of our two crashes made a perfect X up the beach. So that was pretty funny.
Oh man, that's a funny one. I'd be too terrified of having that happen to give it a shot. I'm getting whipped in.
And now they have buoys, so you often
yeah.
don't even have a place to do
That's
it.
true.
But I am old enough.
You were old enough
skied
before they had buoys.
Yes.
Oh man. All right, getting into your career, what's one of your most memorable experiences from your first job of starting out your career?
So I graduated in accounting, but I was working in IT. And imagine at the time, everything was changing. PCs were just becoming used in the workplace. They really weren't being used when I was graduating. So that was brand new. And I was working in IT, and I'll just back up for a second. So when I started that job, I was hired to do data entry while I was in school. And so it was just something to pay the bills. I didn't think much more of it. It had a decent wage. And so I take the job. I'm working on this data entry, and it's mind numbing, right? It's just paper, and I'm keying in information into a spreadsheet. And I'm thinking to myself, there's got to be a way to automate this and make it simpler, faster, right? Like, it's just ridiculous that we as humans are spending so much manual effort. And my boss said he had tried to automate it, but it couldn't be done. And that's all I needed. So I tried to always get my work done faster than everyone else, while maintaining quality scores. And on the side, I was studying Excel and figuring out if there was a way to automate, which I did, presented to them. Their minds were blown. And so as I graduated from school in accounting, they wanted me to stay on and manage the department, which it was fun and exciting and interesting. So I stayed on. So early part of my career I spent in IT, which actually ended up helping me later in my career, and we can get into that in your questions. But anyway, that was an early moment where I discovered I could do things if I put my mind to it, and I could stand out from others by utilizing technology and stuff to make myself better and faster than everybody else.
It must run in the family, because I feel like my career was sort of similar. Started out basically not data entry, but a lot of Excel, and got told the same thing of, this is how we do it. I was like, there has to be a better way. Figured out a way to automate it. And so funny that our careers have had similar starts.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know if it runs in the genes or what it is. During your career, though, what was one of the most rewarding projects or achievements?
Yeah, and this was a hard one. If it's singular projects, we were in 5 different buildings when I was CFO of SPS, and that was just inefficient and not optimal. And so I was assigned with trying to find a building that would fit the entire company. And so being able to find a building at a price point that allowed us to buy it and renovate it, and save the company a lot of money by finding a great deal like that. That as a singular project, that was pretty rewarding. But otherwise, I would answer more generally that building SPS into the powerhouse that it was in the industry, it was regarded as the best in class, and that's pretty rewarding when you can achieve stuff like that.
And remind me and everyone else, how long were you with SPS?
Total of 19 years. I spent 4 years with them. I left for an opportunity to take a CFO title at a small startup bank, and then came back 4 years later as the CFO, and spent 15 years as CFO. Right. SPS is a mortgage servicer.
So you really did spend basically your whole career building it from the ground up into this top tier mortgage servicing company.
Yep.
What was sort of like a pivotal moment in your career that really shaped the rest of your professional journey?
So go back to, I'm working in IT for a small entrepreneur in Provo. Betsy's pregnant with our second child, Sydney. I go with her to a doctor's appointment, and everything's fine with the pregnancy. We're all excited. We go back to work. I pull in the parking lot of work, and the parking lot's empty, and 2 of the computer programmers who worked for me are sitting on the curb outside. And I said, well, what's going on? And they said, the Federal Trade Commission just stormed the building, shut the company down. We're all out of jobs. So that was May. We had just bought our first house, a little condo, in February, and we had made one payment in April, and we had just made our second payment in May, and now I was out of work, and my wife was pregnant with our second child. So obviously I, about shit my pants right there in the parking lot. We started looking for work. Well, I'm not really qualified to be in IT per se because I don't have an education. I'm somewhat a little nervous about going into accounting because I've been out of school now for a couple of years. I haven't really ever used my accounting degree, but there were obviously many more accounting jobs that seemed like I was qualified for. And so I looked for and found my first accounting job up here in Layton, working for Sears Payment Systems, SPS, not Select Portfolio Servicing, SPS, where I ended my career. But anyway, so the first accounting job I took in '93 and started in July, and Sydney was born in September, and everything worked out. But it was
crazy.
It was a very scary moment in my career, but a pivotal change. When you asked that, when I thought about the word pivotal, right, it shifted. Yeah. Had I stayed in IT, who knows? I may have had a successful career. I may have not. I may have had to work harder to try to become certified and educated and valued in that side of the work world. But I looked for an accounting job, found one, and it worked for me. So
yeah. Anyway, that's crazy. I've never heard that story of the Federal Trade Commission storming your work and shutting it down.
Yeah, luckily I wasn't there. I may have been. Yeah. Supposedly what we understand is the sheriff's department were leading the charge, hands on guns, telling everyone to stand up from their desk, hands up where I can see them, and walk out of the building. Well, how traumatic would that be? I didn't get any of that. I just got the after trauma of walking up to an empty parking lot.
Yeah. It's almost as if they're more like the drug enforcers, the DA.
Yes.
They're coming in, shutting down some criminal organization.
Exactly.
Oh, man. For someone just starting out their career, though, or even maybe a couple years into their career, what advice would you give them to sort of help them get a leg up or get a head start?
So my experience, I hear, evidence of this in yours. I always encourage young people to embrace technology. Technology almost certainly will ever be changing, ever improving, and some have resisted it. I saw this early in my career where they were resisting PCs. They were resisting, downloading data instead of printouts because they were used to printouts. And it sounds crazy to us now, right? But just people are resistant to change generally. And technology can feel scary or overwhelming, or I don't get it or I don't understand it. I just encourage people to, whatever technology is coming along, embrace it, use it to your advantage, and that's kind of a good piece of advice that can be applied generally. Use it to be more productive.
Especially I feel like with the emergence of AI and how fast it's growing, I tell even my coworkers as well, like, our jobs probably won't ever be replaced by AI, but you will be replaced by someone who knows how to use AI. Yep. And that's the concern, is if you're just looking at it as, oh, I heard my friend use ChatGPT to make a cooking recipe, but you're not realizing the full potential of being able to use it to solve your equations, your statistics analysis. Like, there's so many use cases that people don't realize it can do. And I feel like I hear all the time of people being like, oh yeah, like I've heard of people like using it to make memes or something like that, and they don't realize like this thing is basically your professional assistant that can answer any question, any equation for you.
Completely agree. Yeah. And it still takes a human. So in your case where you throw out a question to write some code, you still have to be able to implement the code and know if it works right. You have to have that logic that it doesn't to be able to say that works or that's good. But you saved all the time of creating the right syntax and getting it to at least begin to function.
Oh yeah, I've had that experience where I use ChatGPT to write a code, and then all I had to do was go in and just tweak some of the syntax and the language to fit what exactly I needed, and it worked perfectly. And I was like, that literally saved me probably 4 hours of me trying to figure out everything to put in order and to get the results and have to run the query and make sure it works. Instead, I typed my question out to ChatGPT, sends me back within seconds. I change a couple things and hit run, and it works perfectly. So I definitely think with AI, it's going to come down to who knows how to use it and who doesn't.
Yep.
And those that don't are going to get left behind, sadly, and get replaced.
Yeah, and the thing that I would encourage young people is just to be aware and mindful of that concept throughout their career, because there'll be something past AI. It'll be the newest and latest and greatest. So just continue to embrace and learn and use.
Definitely. With you having a long career and 6 kids, and for a good portion of your life as well, very involved with the church and religion, how did you go about balancing your work and family and personal time with everything going on?
So one thing I did, and I would certainly encourage this generally, I didn't bullshit at work. I didn't waste time at work. I basically worked 8 to 5:30 ish my entire career. Yeah, occasionally there was later night than that, or occasionally there was an earlier morning, but generally speaking, I really wasn't working a ton of hours. But when I was there, I made sure I was productive. So that kept work from creeping in to the family time, if you will. Also, I just never believed in, checking work emails while at home, because I knew I would just get sucked in. I just know my personality. So then I'm, working for 2 hours when, that's my only time with the family. So, and then as far as family and personal time, my personal attitude and belief, once you have kids particularly, but even a spouse, now it's not just all about you. And they come first, particularly children. They need your time. You need to run them to practice. You can't say, well, I need to go for a run, or I need to go work out, or I need to read a book for a while and vegetate. Right? The old 1950s father who came home, sat down, read the paper, and didn't help cook, didn't help clean, didn't help with the kid, right? Just was all self-absorbed. That is not a recipe for success. So, as far as balancing that, right, once you got kids, you have to be willing to give up a lot of your personal time and personal interests. But at the same time, I do believe in the 7 habits concept of sharpening the saw. If you don't do something to take care of yourself, working out, reading, whatever it might be, then you risk the other things falling apart. You're not as good professionally. You're not as good as a spouse or a father. So it is important to do those things. But I think, in that priority, once you're on your time, family comes first, you come second. But always try to carve out time. And for me, like, I read on my lunch breaks. That's where I found time to read. I did believe in taking an actual lunch break, and as often as possible getting away from the office. Go grab a sandwich, read a book while you're there. It helped to recharge me, and then either read, at bedtime, but somewhere in there, fit in a workout. When you can.
When you can. And I remember you sharing that advice of always making sure you take a lunch break and step away. At least for me, that's been super helpful, because so much of the time I feel like I need to eat at my desk and keep working on this problem. But an hour or 2 hours later, I'm so burnt out because I haven't had an actual break, and my brain hasn't had time to rest, and I end up performing worse than if I would to just go and take my lunch, take a break, let my brain rest, sort of reset, and then come back to it. So I think that's also just great advice too for someone in their career, to always make sure they're taking time to take their lunch and not just work through their lunch, because I see that so often where people go pick up their lunch, come back to their desk, and keep working. And I'm like, you're going to get burnt out so fast.
On occasion, on a particular day, if you know you want to leave early, I get it. There's moments. But as a general rule, I think that's good.
There are definitely moments. Before we move on, will you just pull your mic up so I can see if the light's still on? All right, we're good. All right, next up, we're going to be going over marriage and relationship advice. So, some of us kids are familiar, but I wanted you to sort of reshare the story of how you met Mom and sort of what drew you to her.
Sure. So I love to tell people that we met in jail, which literally we did meet in jail. The clarification is we were both staff members of the Provo Youth Detention. So we were both going to school. This was before I had moved over to that IT job. So where I actually met her was in the kitchen. I remember it as clear as day. I'm sitting at the prep table in the kitchen. The cooks are cooking, and I'm watching some of the juveniles who were allowed to help in the kitchen that day. And Betsy had just joined the staff, and she came in, and she's wearing this kind of preppy sweater, green sweater, and comes in, introduces herself, and I'm a t-shirt and jeans guy at this point in my life. Very simple. Came from somewhat humble beginnings. As a son of an entrepreneur, we had feast and famine, right?
Yeah.
So we had a boat growing up, so it's hard to argue that we were poor.
Yeah.
We went on vacations to Lake Powell, and we did all kinds of fun stuff as kids, and we never went without. But there were definitely leaner times too. And so those lean times kind of create an attitude and a mentality that stick with you.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So when I thought of myself as, pull myself up by my bootstraps, work hard because, nothing's been given to me. And then there were others who were more well off. And so I meet this preppy girl in the kitchen, and I leave, my shift ends before hers, and I'm walking out the parking lot, and I notice, about a 1-year-old Isuzu iMark with personalized plates, Betsy's. And I'm thinking, okay, here's another one of them, right? She drives basically a brand new car. She dresses really nice. I'm t-shirt and jeans. I just think we are not even in the same universe. Yeah. And so that was what I thought. I enjoyed her. We were friends. And what shifted and caused me to have a completely new interest in her was one of my good friends from high school, Steve Jones, had married Betsy's next door neighbor, Maureen. And I knew Steve and Maureen, and I admired their relationship, and I thought Maureen was fantastic. And I asked Steve one day, because we were in the same accounting program, we had a class together, we're leaving the class, and I said to him, does Maureen have a sister? Because at this point I'd sort of sworn off women. I was tired of the dating scene, and I was looking for something more serious, and I liked Steve and Maureen's relationship. So I asked him, Maureen have a sister? And he says, well, she does, but she's older, quite a bit older than you, and I don't think you'd be interested. But he said, her next door neighbor, Betsy, who just started at youth detention, because Steve worked with us at youth detention. Betsy, who just started youth detention, is basically like a sister. And I was like, okay. And, so now I'm thinking, well, maybe the preppy rich girl might have an interest in me. And so Betsy and I started having more shifts together. And so my thought had changed there that, well, maybe I should give her a chance, because I had written her off as not in my league, like she's out of my league. And then we, as a group of friends from work, were all arranging to go down to the Holiday Bowl together. And she and I ended up riding down and back in the same car, and that's what sealed the deal. That's spending 12-hour drive to California and back, and the entire time we were there, we shared a hotel room in Vegas, completely separate beds, but shared a hotel room in Vegas. We stayed at her uncle's in California. We went to Disneyland together, went to the ball game together, drove home together. So we spent almost 24/7 for probably 3 or 4 days at least.
Yeah.
And when we got back, we knew, like, she's dropping me off at my apartment because clearly we drove her car,
Yeah.
not my dumpy
Yeah.
little car. She's dropping me off at my apartment, and we basically say the same thing together. We say, let's not tell Steve and Maureen because it'll be more fun for them to discover that we're dating
Yeah.
than to have some announcement. And so that was basically how I fell in love.
So was there any first date before that trip, or was that sort of like your sort of first date
Yeah,
type
we
thing?
talked about everything. We talked about, life and marriage and kids and families, and so we covered a lot of ground in those 3 or 4 days. Particularly the drive home was only the two of us. Going down, there were three in the car,
Okay.
and coming home was only the two of us. And by then, we had flirted the entire trip,
Yeah.
so we knew there was something there. There was something
Mhm.
going on, and then to be able to talk, just car time tends to force different
Oh yeah.
conversations, and so we covered a lot, and I felt like we knew each other much better than a lot of people would that quickly in their relationship.
Oh yeah.
And then we essentially saw each other every day from there until we got married.
Yeah. No, that's crazy. I mean, especially like that long car drive. If you start doing the math, it's like if someone starts dating somebody and it's only on the weekends, and it's maybe 4 hours between picking them up and dropping them off and ending the date, like it takes months to get to the time that you spent within those 4 days.
Exactly.
So you had much bigger of a jump start on most people when it comes to falling in love. Um, Obviously, I don't know the ins and outs of the marriage. I'm sure you guys have had your hard times, your good times, but you've lasted 34 years, which I feel like deserves a round of applause. Quite an achievement. But for you, like, what advice would you give to someone, whether they're married or going to get married? What advice would you give them to maintain a successful and happy marriage?
Yeah, so several things here, not any particular order, but some things to keep in mind. You can only control yourself. Occasionally, people want to change their spouse or their
Mhm.
partner, and it's just I fear that's a recipe for disaster. Generally speaking, you should try to accept them, or you should accept them if you want to make the relationship work. You accept them, and you realize you can only control yourself. So if you want to change something about yourself. That's one thought. Another thing that I had heard somewhere, I think it may have been Dr. Laura. We listened to Dr. Laura a fair amount when we had some challenges as a family. That just she gave good advice,
Mhm.
and she's not perfect. I'm not claiming she's perfect, but she gave some good advice. One thing I recall, or at least I attribute to her, I think it was her. She says, "What have you done today that would make your spouse happy that they married you?" If you can answer that positively every day, but again, part of that focus is I can control me,
Yeah.
and I should be able to do things to make you happy. Have I done something today to make you happy, make your life easier? And I thought that was a good one. When we got married, we had the unusual and interesting opportunity for Betsy's dad to be the one who married us.
Oh, yeah.
In his wedding speech, he emphasized unfeigned love, which is not fake love.
Mhm.
So true love. So express true love. Don't fake it. Genuinely love the other person, and that always kind of stuck with me. I don't know if there's I don't think I have a great insight other than just the concept of trying to be real and genuine in
Oh,
our
yeah.
love. Right? Don't keep score. I think that's a big one. Too often, right? If your partner's upset with you, if you've kept score, then you just start laying out
Oh, yeah.
all your evidence and your cards of how they're bad or they need to change. And again, I think that's a recipe for
Mhm.
disaster. If your partner's upset, listen, absorb, take it in, think about what you could or couldn't do differently, but don't keep score. Remember, you're not perfect, and so you can't expect your partner to be perfect.
Oh, yeah.
If you keep that in mind, you give each other a fair amount of grace, right? That, yeah, and neither is perfect. We're both here, we're both committed, we're both trying. Looking for the positives. So to me, when I hear and not, this wouldn't apply in all cases, but generally speaking, when I hear about people who have wandered outside the relationship, or even just have wandering eyes,
Yeah.
I'm thinking, if they put the same attention and energy into their partner, wouldn't they have a lot of the same interests, right? I would think people would be very interested in Betsy. So I look for things that people would be interested, right?
Yeah.
Why would people find her attractive? Why would people want to spend time with her? Why would, and it's a mentality shift that creates a lot of beautiful, almost new felt desire in a 34-year-old relationship, which I love.
Yeah.
I love to look at her with wanton eyes.
Yeah.
So, sorry about that.
You're good.
I apologize. I'll turn it off. Let's see. So, sort of on those same lines, I think we all recognize that early relationships, we put a lot of energy into them.
Oh, yeah.
And that's another thing. To maintain a long-term relationship, you need to put energy in. Meaning, right, when you're first dating and you really like somebody, you're doing things to surprise them, doing things to excite them, touching, flirting, gifts, whatever, right? I get it all. It's just you're doing things to make sure they're aware you really like them and care for them. That doesn't change 34 years later.
Yeah.
They'll still appreciate being wanted, being teased, being flirted with, right? All those things. Quite a list, but I've had 34 years to build the list.
You've had a lot of experience for that list. And I feel like a lot of that, at least speaking for myself, and I'm sure others my age or even younger, struggle with the dating scene right now because a lot of everything you've listed is not there. There's keeping score. There's not thinking of how can I make them happy today. It's all about me and how can they make me happy today. Like, oh, I wanted you to do this one thing and you didn't do it. I'm upset now. And also putting it on the scorecard.
Yes.
And then it builds and builds and builds, as well as the genuine part, like going back to thinking of it as just all about me. I feel like a lot of the time then it results in them not being genuine in their love and in their marriage or relationship, because they're just so focused on themselves and focused on, well, you didn't do this for me and I'm not going to give you my genuine love because you didn't do X, Y, and Z, or you said the wrong thing to me, you misspoke, and I'm also keeping score. And I feel like it's just a recipe for disaster, and I'm sure others can relate to that. Like everything you listed off, everybody at least my age that I talk to wants that in a relationship, but it is so hard to find these days because of just the culture. And I partially blame social media a little bit for that, mainly from the aspect that on social media everybody only puts out their highlights. So it's all about, my partner surprised me with these flowers, my partner took me on vacation to Paris or Hawaii. But what you didn't see was all the fights they had, all the times he didn't get her flowers, and all these other things. And all you see is the highlight. And you're thinking, well, my spouse didn't get me a gift. My spouse didn't take me on a surprise vacation.
So true.
And I feel like it just builds this recipe or this combination to just end up not being happy in your relationship when there's plenty of reasons to be happy. And you're just seeing these comparisons to other relationships where all you see is their highlights. And you're thinking, well, my relationship isn't highlight after highlight after highlight. Like a relationship is up and downs, and it's sticking with them through the up and downs and enjoying the highs and trying to find joy in the lows together.
Yeah. Digging out of a low is, I as a parent particularly, watching a child dig out of a low, whatever it is, relationship, career, anything, that's more rewarding to me as a parent than any of the highlights. State champions, it's wonderful. Yes, when you're on top of the mountain, everybody's happy. Right? But when you pick yourself up and you figure something out, or you work your way through something, overcoming challenges is the only thing you can really hope for as a parent. It's just watching a child figure that out and pick themselves up and try again, do it again.
Yeah. One question I did have, didn't make it to the list, but I thought of later was, so I've read the book and I'm not sure if you've read it, but The Four Love Languages.
Mm-hmm.
So those that are not familiar with it, it's physical touch, words of affirmation, acts of service, and gifts. And one of the points he brings up in the book, which I feel like is really true, is if you and your partner or spouse have different love languages, it's like speaking another language when you're trying to show them love and trying to learn that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was curious with you and mom, like, did you sort of luck out and speak the same love language, or did you speak different ones? And how did you sort of go about navigating it, especially if you had different love languages?
I was pretty certain I had that in. I don't see it on my notes, but I remember the concept that I wanted to build on around that. My personal opinion, everyone speaks every love language.
Yeah.
And you should be able to speak all love languages. It is important to understand that if they really need you to clean the house and you're buying them lavish gifts that you can't afford, you're going to create a different kind of stress, right? You're not only not getting your chores done for me, but you're buying something we can't afford, and you're thinking. So I get the concept, but I maintain you better be willing and wanting to speak all the love languages.
Yeah.
You have to figure out when the right time and place is to use each of those languages, but completely agree with the concept of you've got to read the room, you've got to know your partner well to be able to care for their needs, give them what they are looking for. And so I would put it much more of, if you are more interested in their happiness and they're more interested in your happiness, that's the magic.
Yeah.
So you use the word lucky. I completely consider myself lucky. Now, I was also pretty serious about finding somebody who I thought I would want to be with forever. So, so I was consciously looking for what I considered, I found, is the whole package.
Yeah.
Right? There's I am not a supermodel. Your mother's not a supermodel.
Yeah.
But I find her damn attractive. Right? I am not a Harvard, law school grad set to make billions of dollars. She wasn't either, right? All I'm trying to say is I was looking for a great life partner.
Yeah.
And that was part of the focus and emphasis that I had. But let's be clear on a few things. One, I wanted to find somebody who I loved their eyes, and I loved kissing them, because as things all start to fade, when you get towards the very end, that's all you have left. And she was the best kisser I ever kissed, and I loved looking at her eyes, and so that was important to me. Being able to have a good conversation, and stimulating, interesting conversation. Often it implies differences of opinion, but anyway, those were a few things that guided me early, I thought.
So yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like you need to be well versed in all love languages to an extent, and at least from my own experience, like, everyone needs all four love languages to an extent. There's usually one or two, though, that are ranked a little bit higher that might need a little more attention. Like you're saying, like cleaning the kitchen as an act of service might be ranked super high for your partner or spouse. Like, you do that, their happiness is through the roof, and all it took you was 15 minutes out of your day, and it's through the roof. And for you, it might be receiving a gift and they show up with a treat to surprise you with. Like, it can be something super simple. But I think there, like, it takes that conscious effort of, what can I do to make you happy, and having that genuine intent of, I know this would make you happy, I'll do that for you. Like, I'll clean the kitchen, I'll surprise you with flowers, I'll hold your hand while we're out walking around, I'll give you a kiss, and whatever it might be in their love language that they speak the most of, I think goes a long ways. Last one when it comes for your marriage was, so might surprise a lot of people, but you have 6 kids. So many more than the usual, but how was being a dad, or how has being a dad of 6 changed you as a person?
Uh, yeah, so a few different thoughts here again. Early on, I felt a tremendous pressure to provide. There were so many
Mm,
mouths coming along so quickly. And don't get me wrong, we wanted and planned every pregnancy. None were
yeah,
surprises, none were unplanned, none were, and oh darn it, guess what happened? They were all planned. Um, Betsy is fantastic with kids. Um, and she was so beautiful and adorable as a mother of young kids, which you've been able to observe with
mm,
grandchildren, right?
oh,
Her
yeah,
doting on Brinley. She was that way with you guys all your young years. But I felt a tremendous pressure in answer to your question to provide. And so I worked really hard.
mhm,
Back to our thoughts about work. When I was at work, my number one goal and job was outperform everyone around me.
oh,
I will
yeah,
make them almost look silly. I can outperform them so well. And looking for the next advancement and something to improve the economic situation for the family. Um, uh, it's changed me. Having 6 kids has also changed me in this way. Much later in life now, even if we only have half of you gathered, it's a party,
oh,
right? Which is
yeah.
fun, right? Some people, shocked about 6 kids and oh my goodness,
Yeah,
what? Um, but it is what it is, right? I
mhm,
admit, without an Orthodox religion pushing us, we probably wouldn't have had 6 kids. I don't know if I would have
yeah,
met you, maybe,
yeah,
but you're on that cusp of maybe
yeah,
not, right? Really? I'd never meet you,
yeah,
and certainly not Tate or Levi, or
yeah, or
right.
Michaela.
Um, so that's terribly rewarding and makes me very happy
Oh,
to
yeah,
have been placed in that position and and fathered such a crew. Um, but uh, back to the party, right? It's a party almost any time we gather because
oh,
there's so
yeah,
many of you. It's a crowd, and so there's just energy and fun. Um, and then lastly, how it's changed me. Um, I'm also very humbled by watching you now as adults and how smart and talented and driven and interested in the breadth of ideas and interests and
mhm,
influences. And right, and people say, you think you got it figured out with your first kid, and then you're surprised when the second one comes along and they're completely different. And I would tell you, yes, all 6 are
6
very,
times.
yes, yeah. It's just fascinating, shocking, and interesting all at the same time.
Yeah,
That you could all be so different, and yet you all came from us.
yeah, but it is interesting now that we're all older, how, at least from my perspective, obviously not from a parent's perspective, but just from a sibling's perspective, of we're all super different, but yet we're all very similar at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
which is somewhat funny because if you looked at us just individually, you'd be like, well, these are 6 completely different people. But then if you start digging in, you're like, they're all pretty similar, but
Yeah.
pretty unique at the same time, which is sort of fun.
Yes.
Um, we are just at the halfway point. I just wanted to check your mic. You'll flip it up one more time. All right, we're still good. Awesome. Just don't know how long these mics last, so we're
Mm-hmm.
checking them every so often. All right, so now we're moving on to life lessons and advice. For the first one, um, I feel like I've asked you, I think this before, but just for the record, what is the best advice you've ever received?
Again, anytime you touch the word best, I get a little
One
nervous.
of the best. I'll broaden
uh,
it. One of the best.
so here's 3 that I came up with. Um, I got this advice career wise. They said if you get a business degree, get it in accounting, which
Mm-hmm.
I probably would have never picked accounting. It ended up working well for me, so I have to attribute that to pretty good advice. Uh, Dr. Laura then 2 that she gave that I really liked. as far as finding a good partner, choose wisely, treat kindly.
Yeah.
I thought that's solid advice, right? You're very determined and particular in your choice as best you can, which I admit it's a roll of the dice and a lot of luck involved. But the treat kindly you can completely control.
Oh, yeah.
And then her other one was eat less, move more. So when you want to get in better shape, that's all that matters. You can do it in a variety of ways, but it basically comes down to those 4 words: eat less, move more. So anytime I feel like I want to change something physically, those are the words that echo in my head is, I know what I need to do. I might not like it.
Keep it simple, stupid.
Yes.
You don't need to overcomplicate it. I definitely do remember growing up and hearing the choose wisely, treat kindly very often. So I've always kept that as well in the back of my head of when it comes to relationships of choose wisely and treat kindly, which both are within your control. Like you can always choose wisely, and then you can always choose to be kind to your partner or your spouse. So trying to take you back to quite a few years ago when you were 28, what was one of your biggest dreams or aspirations when you were my age?
I may have owned a boat by the time I was your age. If I didn't, it was right around that age. So that was a dream of mine, and I was super excited when my dad was selling his boat. I could afford it because at that point it was old. But yeah, just loved being able to have a boat to do some of the same things I experienced as a child. It's forced togetherness. Right? There's only so far you can go when you're on the boat. And then the cheering for each other. I just really enjoyed that as a kid, and I wanted my kids to experience that too. Success, doing something new and different, and the siblings are all excited for them. But then also traveling internationally, particularly, felt like a dream, right, at that age and stage. I forget, our first trip internationally, as I recall, was Aruba, and it was about our 40th birthday.
That sounds right,
So that was at your age. Betsy and I both lived internationally on our missions, so there was that experience, but there's lots of places we wanted to see. And she particularly had a thirst to travel, much more so than I did. Her parents had encouraged all of her and her siblings to travel as much as they could before they got married, thinking that it was more difficult after marriage. And I agree with that to an extent, but otherwise, right, the other thing is you just prioritize. Right? What are you interested in? Where do you want to spend your money? And most anybody can figure out a way to do any of these things without breaking the bank. So those were a couple of my dreams: owning a boat and traveling.
No, I can speak on at least behalf of myself and probably all of the siblings that we all hold those memories of boating super close to our hearts because of that sort of forced closeness and cheering each other on. Like there's nothing quite like it when you're on a boat for 6 hours with just your brothers and sisters and your parents, and you're cheering each other on as you're trying something new and you're learning a new trick, and you've got everyone's support there. It really is one of those unique situations that you don't really get anywhere else, at least that I've experienced. As you've gotten older, how has sort of your perspective on life changed?
So obviously, I know some people might not think 57 is that old. Other people are thinking it. You talk to a 14-year-old, 57 sounds ancient. Talk to an 80-year-old, they're like thinking you're young and spry. But mortality has become very vivid more recently. Right? Enough people around my age have died or dying, or serious illnesses and stuff. That's always a bit of a shocker to me. When it's not that shocking if you hear a 57-year-old died. It's still sad, but 20-somethings keel over. Everybody's devastated. 57. So I'm starting to enter an age where people aren't going to be that surprised, and that somewhat made me appreciate life more. I think leaving a religion and dropping any religious view of the world, this is it. So meals are interesting to me. Travel experiences, conversations are interesting to me.
Yeah.
Right? This conversation might never ever happen again.
Oh, yeah.
Now it's recorded, which is beautiful. But life is full of moments and experiences, and I feel like I'm much more present, much more appreciating simple moments in life than I ever did when I was young and obviously influenced by religion. On top of that, I do I do appreciate that nice things make life comfortable. I do like nice things. I like them mostly because it makes life comfortable. And then experiences make life rich. At the end of the day, owning one more nice thing, yes, it might make life comfortable, but it doesn't make life rich.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like having a house full of all kinds of nice, to me, having a great meal at a Paris cafe is just more interesting, right? Than having a super nice sofa.
Yep. Or the latest big screen TV.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, there's no need to keep up with the Joneses is another way I look at it. Is you have those people who want the next biggest thing or best thing, and instead they could be making their life a lot richer by experiencing life, going on adventures. All right, and we're back. So, giving advice to someone younger, probably let's just say in their 20s or so, like getting started in really adult life, because technically you're an adult at 18, but I really feel like adult life really starts more around 20, and then 21 you're basically a 1-year-old adult, and so on and so forth. What is sort of like your advice to someone on what's like the biggest mistake someone could make in their life?
To me, choosing a poor life partner, sadly, can make a significant difference. So back to the choose wisely, do all you can to try and choose wisely. It's still a roll of the dice. Absolutely understand. But put some real thought, effort, and energy in that if you choose to have a partner. Another mistake I see too often is dwelling on the past. The past is the past. It can't be relived, can't be changed. So dwelling on the past, just it's isolating and it's stunting, in my opinion. And then because financial and economic security, at least, was super important to me, and I think it is to many and most. I often try to emphasize a mistake is start saving too late, because the biggest advantage you have as a young person is time. And then the other assumption that I see people make as a mistake is assuming they can beat the market. So start saving early and buy the market. It'll just, everything else is simple magic. It's all explainable. There's no get rich quick scheme. There's none of that. It's right. Anyway.
Yeah, I feel like that's good, playing the long game and being patient. A lot of people, like you pointed out, want the get rich quick scheme because they want that instant gratification of, I made one trade and I'm a millionaire now and I'm set for life, instead of just buying the market. And my favorite thing is dollar cost averaging. You just slowly keep putting more and more and more in it. Over time, in the long run, you're going to make a great return over the long haul, versus trying to time the market and then trying to time when to get out of the market. Instead, if you just slowly build your portfolio up, it works out in the end.
Yeah, a mistake I made too along those lines was as the market goes through economic cycles and has some ups and downs, right? Generally speaking, it's always on an upward trajectory, but there are periods of time too where it's up and down, and shifting stuff around when it's going down or on a downward swing, right? Just buy the entire market, make it simple. Index funds, ETFs, you're just trying to just ride the general wave. And I could have had more money set aside had I not tried to be smart.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's why, assuming you can beat the market is in that mentality, right? I could do something here to preserve some of my wealth so I can come back in, to use your language about timing. But I would get nervous every now and then and think there was some good move to be made here.
Mm-hmm.
The best move is just buy the broad market and stick with it. So anyway.
Oh yeah, especially with investing, I feel like a lot of people let their emotions get to them.
Mm-hmm.
Especially like you're saying, overall the trajectory is basically always up for most markets. It's always on an upward trajectory, but you do have cycles of up and down where there are better moments to buy and there's better moments to sell. And at least my sort of favorite thing that I've sort of held when it comes to buying and selling is when there's blood in the streets, you buy, and when there's euphoria in the market, you sell.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, a lot of the time, I hear and see people get caught up with when there's blood in the streets, they sell, and when there's euphoria in the markets, they buy.
Yep.
And then they end up getting wrecked and they lose a lot of money and they think everything investment related is a scam and they don't understand how people can do it. And it's because they let their emotions get to them. They FOMO in and they buy when everything's on a huge up and the euphoria is there. Everyone's super hyped. Instead of buying a year or 6 months before when everyone was saying to sell, and instead you should have been buying when they were saying to sell. Next area I wanted to cover with you is your values and beliefs. So obviously spending majority of your life within a organized religion and having left that, there are those people that might say, like, how could you hold beliefs when you don't have a religion, which I think is very silly.
Mm-hmm.
It's like as if someone can't have their own personal beliefs. But for you, I'd be curious to hear sort of like what values or beliefs do you hold most dearly to your heart?
So this concept comes from Buddhism, but I don't consider myself a Buddhist. I just think that there's wisdom in a variety of places, right? As much distaste as I have of religion generally and, Christianity and whatnot, some of Jesus's teachings are pretty basic, right? They've been around from before him, right? The golden rule, there's lots of kindness and love. Agreed. So to me, there's good principles everywhere. For me, the Buddhist principles of impermanence and interdependence are kind of guiding principles for me and values that I hold, meaning impermanence, we're all going to die and we're all ever changing. Once you latch onto that concept, it helps frame things a lot, right? Back to my appreciation for conversations or meals or just a beautiful day or whatever. Yeah, because soon this is all going to be over.
Yeah.
And then impermanence, that we're all ever changing, right? So you watch, I am probably changing over time. And so I expect and give grace and space for those around me to change. And then interdependence is somewhat related, that we are all impacting each other. None of us are complete individuals. We are shaped and created by genes we didn't choose. We're shaped and created by people who have influenced us, by circumstances. That whole principle of interdependence emphasizes a concept that can you just look at something and see all the interconnectedness of the table, right? Well, somebody designed the table, so there was a designer. There's somebody who had to extract minerals from the earth probably to be able to form the table. Then there's the person who put the table together. Then there's the person who shipped the table. Then there's the person who put it in the store, and the cashier that helped me, right? All that can you look at, in this example, an object and see all that interconnectedness? Potentially hundreds of humans made this table available for us. And so that just gaining an appreciation for anything you look at and see, you just realize the whole interconnectedness of the human race, and then the impermanence of it all. And those are just two ways to kind of balance a view of life. And it's been helpful to me.
Yeah, no, I feel like those are great values or beliefs to hold.
Can I share one more?
Yeah.
I just looked at my notes and it reminded me. I saw this, I think, on TikTok of all places, but I thought it was pretty beautifully put. It was emphasizing that certain people get their moral compass from horizontal view of life, and some get it from a vertical view of life. Meaning, often your religions are emphasizing my morals come from a vertical source above me that's greater and grander than everyone else, and I am beholden to that, and I judge all my actions here in the horizontal sphere with what's dictated from there.
Yeah.
And on occasion, personal opinion, I find people hurting other people because that entity said they should or could do that. And yet I tend to think of life much more horizontal morality perspective of I should be doing things that don't hurt others, that help others, or give people, space and freedom to be themselves and to do what makes them happy, as I would expect having the freedom to do what makes me happy, within reason, right? Again, as long as it's not hurting someone else, why does somebody have an opinion if it's not causing harm or pain? So anyway.
Yeah. With you mentioning impermanence, I sort of want to take a step back, actually. I thought of was going back to your marriage. One thing that I hear a lot in my own personal life, and I've heard from friends and other families, is when it comes to their partner, relationships ending because they're not who I fell in love with. They've changed. They're no longer the person I fell in love with and why I picked them. How, or like, what would be your advice or take on that? Of both you and mom have changed drastically over the years, and some of those changes could have been small and other ones big, but just how do you go about like making sure that you always loved who they were growing into or changing into? So I feel like I hear so often relationships and marriages ending because, quote unquote, they've changed and they're no longer who I fell in love with.
I don't know where I heard this, but it makes a lot of sense to me. I heard, generally speaking, you're married to 3 people in your life. Sometimes it's the same person, or sometimes it's multiple people. Meaning that just life is so different when you're 20-something. Life is so different when you're middle-aged and raising teenagers. And then life is so different when the kids are gone and you're in your later years. And so that's where I think, if that's what they intended, it makes sense to my mind that there's just such a spectrum of life there. And to expect a person to be the same person throughout that entire journey of life is pretty unfair. You're not going to be the same person. Why are you expecting them to be? So and I admit sometimes the right answer is to move on. Sometimes it's just not right it's not a good fit any longer. So I have total respect, admiration, sympathy for when those moments happen. For me, and the luck that I feel like, Betsy's extremely patient, extremely kind, extremely loving, extremely interesting as a person. She's, again, I go back to the whole package. For me, it just works. But I also admit that we put a lot of energy into our relationship. We were hyper religious about weekly dates.
Yeah.
We are hyper religious about getaways. Granted, getaways often can't really happen that often until your
Yeah.
kids are older. So you make it through a pretty good stretch just to get to the point where you could get away.
Yep.
But weekly dates, and to me, time and interest and attention are another thing, right? So when you are together, right, take an interest in them and be interested in their views, their activities, their interests, whatever they're reading, whatever is going on in their life. And then we've talked about several of the other kind of secrets, but yeah, it's the respect that you might not make it through life with the same partner because that's a long road. If you do happen to recognize they are going to change and evolve and develop as a person, then and so you're watching for that to happen to a degree and embracing it and being interested in it rather than resistant to it. But there's going to be times where the change is enough, and it's no longer a good partnership.
Yeah,
that will happen.
Yeah, at least like hearing that, sort of my takeaway is almost like finding someone who you love their character, not so much like who they are in the moment, but their character. Because most people, their overall character of who they are as a being doesn't really change, but what they might do for work might change. What they like to do as a hobby will change, and so on and so forth. And so often, like, people will say they changed because they picked up a different hobby and dropped the old one. It's like, well, they didn't really change. Like, that's a pretty superficial, top level thing. But it's like, if you can find someone who you love as a genuine person and based off their character, I feel like is where probably a lot of that magic does come from. At least just hearing how you speak of mom, like you describing her as patient and kind, like that's her character. And it's not like, well, she always made dinner and she always kept a clean house. Not those types of things. It was all about her character. And I feel like that's a big thing when it comes to something successful, is finding someone whose character you fall in love with.
Yeah, good observation.
Last one, for your values and beliefs, how would you define success, and has it changed over time?
I think it's changed over time. So post exit from religion, the biggest thing for me, and I think religious people could apply this too. That's not meant that way. Just that leading up to the exit, my life was not peaceful. There was so much torment going on, trying to wrestle with that decision, that moment, that became really one of my guiding forces. If you're staying in the church, I hope you're at peace. Right? If you are out of the church or whatever you're doing in life, I just wish you peace. I want you to have peace. I want me to have peace. At the end of the day, that is success to me.
Yeah.
If money makes you super stressed, then I think you should work your ass off and save as much as you can to try and get to a point where you can be at peace.
Yeah.
If relationship turmoil creates a lack of peace, then figure that relationship turmoil out. Either fix it or potentially move on. Right? Peace is the ultimate success factor in my mind.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Sorry,
the ultimate success moment or achievement, right? And you're ever seeking it. Yeah, every day you're just trying to figure out a way to live peacefully, and sometimes that means I need to go out and mow the lawn because otherwise I know I'm not going to be at peace.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I think when it comes to being at peace, I'm similar to you in the aspect that I like a lot of Buddhist teachings, but I don't consider myself a Buddhist. But one of my favorite is not accepting things for as they are causes usually the most pain and sadness. And I feel like being at peace is having the ability to accept things for as they are and not as you wish they were. And I've, especially lately, everything I've been going through, that's been one of my biggest sort of things that I've played in my head over and over again is you have to accept things for as they are, not for how you wish they were. Which obviously is much easier said than done, depending on
Totally.
what you're going through. But overall, like if you can keep that mindset, I feel like that brings a lot more peace of just knowing this is how it is. I have to accept it. And life moves on as well. Like
Yep.
you'll get through it. It's not a permanent state of mind that you're going to be stuck in.
Nope. No, that's beautifully put. And agree completely that, like you said, it's the awareness. Am I creating more suffering?
Mm-hmm.
Or could I reduce my suffering by saying, okay, this is what it is. Now what? Because there's a twist on that some people hear the word accepting the situation as it is to mean you're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah.
Well, it's not exactly the same thing. One is saying, don't create any more suffering in the moment by wishing this wasn't the moment. It is what it is. Now what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Well, maybe nothing, maybe something. That's your choice. But yeah. So if you don't like the circumstances, okay, then start to do something about it.
Yeah.
But just wishing it was different right now just causes angst.
Yep. So we're back for the final section of the interview. Least but not least important, it is a big one, is your future and your legacy. To start it off, the question I have for you is sort of what are your hopes and dreams for the future, both for yourself as well as for our family as a whole?
Mm-hmm. So there's still places I want to see in the world. To me, travel changes your perspective and view of life in the world, right? You realize, number one, we're all the same, much more than we are different. Same stresses and strains are in India and the UK and here. Right? They're just, we're all humans. We're all experiencing a lot of the same worries and dreams and so forth. They might be in different, economic stratosphere levels, sure, but generally people want meaningful relationships. They want a good meal. They want a fun time. They want, right? We're all the same. So travel for me, as far as the future, there are some places I want to see and learn about. I want to be able to give back. I do. Once I truly do retire, I don't know if I am or I'm not really. I am sort of in a gray moment.
Yeah.
So once I am, I know that I'm done with work. I do plan to seek out opportunities to help, nonprofit types of organizations do some good. So I want to give back. Simple, I want to continue to develop as a cook. I enjoy cooking. There's so much to me about life that is food. It's either experiencing somebody else's cooking that you admire or are interested in, or providing a meal to those you love. And certainly I want to stay healthy and be around as long as I can, but I also believe in living life fully and playing hard enough that if that puts me a little bit at risk, right, I'm okay with that. As far as the family, number one, I want you guys to continue to develop as kind, compassionate people. The world needs more kindness and compassion, and if I've somehow produced 6 people that add to the kindness and compassion in the world, that's a pretty damn good success. And I want you, like I said, to be at peace. And I think those two often can pretty much go hand in hand. I think the more peace you have in your own life, the kinder and more compassionate you are to others. So those often play off each other. And then similarly, I wish and want for you all to travel to see other places and peoples and experience those things.
Yeah, I think all those are great hopes and dreams. I think traveling, like you said, gives you a lot of perspective on life of just we're all human, as well as I think at least for me and my experience as well of traveling is giving you the perspective of like at least for the situation we're in, and like you mentioned the economic difference, maybe different, but we all have the same similar struggles. But seeing that economic difference really does put into perspective just like how fortunate you are if you do have a roof over your head and you have warm water and you have food in your fridge and in your pantry. Like we take those things for so granted, but then you go to another country where they're having one meal a day. They have no running water. They have a well that they have to go get water from, and you just realize like, wow, I thought like my life was hard, and then you see what they're dealing with, but you still see them with a smile on their face. And but like to someone like us, if you put us in that situation, you probably wouldn't see a smile ever.
Yeah.
Because we'd be so upset that we don't have our running water, we don't have almost unlimited food to an extent of meaning I can drive to the store right now and basically buy any type of food I want and have it in my house within a couple minutes. I think offers a huge perspective. So I definitely agree having us all travel more. And like you said, having 6 kids, you definitely help contribute kindness and compassion to the world. I like to think of all of us as very kind and compassionate people. So you've done well there. In regards to your legacy, what would be sort of some of the life lessons that you've learned throughout your years that you'd like to pass on to us and future generations?
So just a general one, I do believe in working hard and playing hard. To me, you can't be so absorbed with work and such that your life is out of balance in that regard. And so cut that off at a certain point and go play. And when you play hard, meaning do stuff, push the envelope, do things that challenge you, that are maybe hard for you. So if traveling's hard for you, you get nervous, travel, push through that, right? If you like riding motorcycles, right? Ride motorcycles. Yes, there's some danger there. Okay. Right. So yeah, just enjoy life, live it fully, even if there's some risks there. I think that's worth doing, right? When you're too, you don't live life. You're too sheltered and too controlled. On the finance side, right? The life lesson I'd pass on: you're always trying to get up to 10% of your income in your savings annually. If you can target that and push towards that as quickly as possible, that just sets you up for success. And that was important to me, assuming that something similar is important to most others. Having enough set aside at the end of the day where you can be comfortable and not worry and have more peace of that. One way we did that, generally speaking, we lived off of our salary and saved almost all of our bonuses. So that was a way we tried to have a life cheat. As far as relationships, life lessons, some of these we touched on, but phrased a little differently: be forgiving. Remember you're imperfect. Give them the benefit of the doubt, just like you'd want them. Oh, this is where I put it. Love languages. It's love languages. Speak all of them, right? Like we said earlier. I think that's it.
Yep. Well, the next question, we just got 2 more. This one might be similar to just the previous one, but I was curious if it'd be any different. But if you could give one piece of advice to your grandchild, because you only have one right now, so grandchild, hopefully grandchildren in the future, what would it be?
Yeah, not a lot different. I guess the one thing that comes to mind is give your parents grace and compassion, because they're trying their best. None of us are perfect. Most of us successfully screw up our kids in some way, unintentionally. If you can wrap your head around that as a kid and grant some grace to your parents who are trying, right, then that's a good mindset, particularly depending on when I'm giving the grandchild that piece of advice. They're entering their teenage years.
Depending on when she listens to this.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. So I saw something similar, I think, on TikTok or Instagram. It was just saying, the essence of it was give your parents grace, because this is their first time going through life as well. And like as dumb as it sounds, that was so eye opening to me, because it's like growing up, you think your parents have everything figured out. They know what to do when this issue occurs, this problem happens, they've got the answer. And then you get older and you quickly realize, no, they were just trying to figure it out while we were dealing with the issue. They didn't have the answer. They were just going off of what they thought was the best option. And
Yep.
it's so eye opening when you realize that it is their first time going through life. So give them grace. Like, they, whether you're a family that only has one kid, or in our case 6 kids, like, give them grace, because each kid is different. So they're learning how to parent one kid, and then the next kid's completely different, and they're having to learn how to parent them differently.
Yep.
And times that by 6, and you've got quite a few different ways of having to parent, and each time you're having to adjust on, am I trying to help Connor with a problem? Am I trying to help Sydney with a problem? Or am I trying to help Tate with a problem? Okay, well, if that's the case, I need to approach it this direction, and giving them the grace of, they might mess up. They might give the wrong advice, say the wrong thing. But at the end of the day, like, at least in our case, I always look back at it as your intent was always right. Whether it came across in the right way or not, your intent was right. But there again, like you said, everyone's not perfect, and neither are your parents. And that's just been a big thing, that's been eye-opening for me as I've gotten older and been an adult for a while now, is realizing you're not perfect. But there's also beauty in that, of not being perfect.
Yeah, on those lines, I still experience it to a degree. Like, I can still call my dad up, and he can diagnose and fix things over the phone, just by hearing me describe a problem.
Yeah.
and when you place your parents in that category, where they have enough life experience that they know how to fix an electrical outlet, or they know how to cook a chicken, or they know how, you start to assume they know everything.
Yep.
Well, those are all very defined scientific rules governing them.
All right, we had some technical issues, so we had to reset. I think we had just left off on accepting that your parents aren't perfect, and realizing that they're going through life their first time as well. The last question I have for you is, how would you like to be remembered by family and friends?
So some we touched on earlier. I would like to be remembered as a kind, compassionate person, but also fiercely loyal to the family. Just that has been a defining element of me, right? And the seismic shift that occurred in our lives when we decided to leave the church, which was, our foundation. At least that's how we viewed it at the time. But family and my devotion and loyalty to them clarified that moment for me, to where that decision was actually very easy when weighed against, which do I choose? And so that's kind of how I'd like people to think of me and remember me, that I was kind and compassionate generally as a person, and at the end of the day, family was first.
Yeah, I definitely. I mean, that's at least. Hopefully, we have a lot more years with you. But as of right now, that's at least how you'd be remembered by me, is fiercely loyal to the family, and family always came first. You're always someone who, when there's an issue that was happening, we could come to you and knew whether you could give us the answer or fix the problem. We at least knew we could come to you and brainstorm an idea of how to figure it out. Like we mentioned, parents aren't perfect, so you didn't always have the answer, but you were at least a listening ear of someone you could come to and talk to. That is the end of our questions. Before we close, I just wanted to thank you for doing this. It means a lot having you on here, especially as the first guest. It's a special opportunity to have you kick off this podcast of mine. Having this with you is also something I wanted to do regardless of a podcast. just because I've always been one that likes to ask questions and wants to hear insight from other people. And I feel like you're somebody who had insight and advice and wisdom that would benefit me. And when I see something that could benefit me, I'm sure that there's others that would benefit. So I wanted to also give you the opportunity to share what you have for myself and for others to hear, because I'm sure that it'll benefit many.
Oh, kind words. I appreciate that. Certainly, like you said earlier, the intent is always right.
Yes.
But also kudos to you for doing this. Right? I pride myself on, if I say I'm going to do something, I do it, and I see that this evidence of that same characteristic in you of just, hey, I have an idea, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
So well done.
Thank you. All right. We'll catch you next episode. Well, that wraps up another episode of the Crow's Nest Interviews podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss future interviews. Feel free to leave a review or share this episode with friends and family who might find it inspiring. You can follow us on social media platforms for updates and more content, and if you have any suggestions or know someone with an interesting story, have them reach out to us. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time on the Crow's Nest Interviews podcast.